good to be with you. And I think that there are a lot of people who are going to ask him. We saw last week when the director of national intelligence and the head of the National Security Agency basically refused to comment on whether or not Trump had told them to try and get Comey to stop the investigation. So I think that there could be a situation where Sessions says, I'm not going to talk about my private conversations with the president. But the reason I don't believe that will happen is that Jeff Sessions' very integrity is being questioned by people that he spent 3 decades serving in the Senate with. The hearing last week made it look like he potentially violated the recusal that he had agreed to, that he possibly had a third contact with the Russian ambassador when he only said he had 2 and initially said he had none. And there's really a whole host of other things. Comey said that he told Sessions not to leave him alone with Trump anymore, and Comey's telling Sessions basically just shrugged. So Comey testified for 3 hours last week, and he said a lot about Jeff Sessions, and the hearing is Jeff Sessions' chance to clear his name, and I think it's very dangerous for him if he tries to punt on all the tough questions and tries to dodge and weave and not comment, because it will make him look like he's hiding something, and when something looks like a cover-up, it usually is.
And it feels like there are almost 2 big groups here, and you mentioned them. It's the Russia meddling, and then it's also the James Comey and his firing. You mentioned this, the 3rd meeting with the Russians that allegedly Jeff Sessions did have. If it's shown that he knowingly lied about that Russia contact that he had during his confirmation hearing, what does that mean for him?
It's really hard to prove perjury. You have to kind of prove knowingly that he knowingly lied. He definitely made a false statement to the Senate Judiciary Committee on January 10th. He said, under oath, I had no contacts with the Russians. He brought it up without even being asked, and we now know that's not true. So I think it's hard to see Sessions getting prosecuted for that. He has filed a clarification. His people deny that there was this 3rd meeting, but reportedly the FBI picked it up in intercepts between Russians talking to other Russians about this meeting between the Russian ambassador and Sessions. So certainly it would be very damning. And one of the things is, it seems fair to assume that Robert Mueller, the new special counsel who's creating this independent investigation to look into all things Russia, that he will certainly look into the Attorney General's involvement in Comey's firing, which he's now investigating. And you're right, it is a separate issue. That's an obstruction of justice issue. And then totally separate and apart from that is the underlying Russian meddling, which is, what did Russia do? Did they collude with people on the Trump campaign? What did the Trump campaign people know Russia was doing during the campaign? And Sessions has become a main character in both stories.
Exactly. If we go back to Comey now, one of the things that we've heard from the president, obviously, was this mention of tapes. And he referenced it again at the end of the week, sort of not confirming, but saying maybe there's something coming soon. Have we learned any more about whether or not there are, be it tapes or recordings in some way of what happened in that meeting between Comey and the president?
What we know is that Trump has a long history of taping his meetings and conversations, taping interviews, having taping systems installed in his office. We don't know whether he actually did it in this case or he's just sort of threatened that he might have done it. And Trump said on Friday, I'll let you know soon. Some people were speculating maybe that gives him time to destroy the tapes. But there's precedent here. The Supreme Court forced Richard Nixon to hand over his White House tapes. He couldn't keep those and claim that those were somehow privileged or protected. He had to turn them over. And that's why if these tapes exist, it's very bad for the president, because it will mean that they come out. And you have to wonder if Trump does have tapes and they sort of are exculpatory, they show that his side of the story is true and Comey's is false, he definitely would have released them by now.
Well, it's also, he's the one that brought them up. Nobody else had mentioned it. He's the one that said, these, you better be careful in case they're tapes that exist. Could they be subpoenaed? Could eventually it get to that point if they're not released?
Yeah, Susan Collins, the Republican senator from Maine, yesterday said she's willing to subpoena the tapes. There's a couple Republicans in the Senate who are willing to go that direction. There's no question Bob Mueller, the special counsel, would likely want to get these tapes because the tapes would be conclusive evidence about what was and wasn't said. And so there's no question the House or the Senate could vote to subpoena Trump. And if he refused to comply with that subpoena, again, there's a court precedent here. He could be held in contempt of Congress, and that potentially could become obstruction of justice or even abuse of power.
We just had a news conference, I think probably within the last half hour here on CBSN. The attorney generals in D.C. and Maryland have filed a lawsuit now alleging that the president breached his constitutional oath over Trump business dealings and foreign governments in taking monetary, money for services from them in his hotels. What more can you tell us about that, and what do we know?
This is a significant lawsuit because a lot of lawyers, when you talk to them, they say that the people who have the best chance of winning a case against Trump on what's called the emoluments clause of the Constitution are states, that they're sort of under the way the Constitution is written, they can present themselves as an aggrieved party in a way that there have been a lot of lawsuits against Trump since he took office on this same point, which is he's taking money from foreign governments, he's taking money from other state governments with his hotels. We've had lawsuits here in D.C. where private business owners are suing Trump and saying it's unfair competition because people are going to get dinner at Trump's hotel instead of my hotel. But this lawsuit has a lot more credibility because especially the Attorney General in Maryland has what lawyers call standing to be able to say we are an aggrieved party, and if they get the right kind of judge, they could get a very favorable judgment.
And James, before we let you go, another thing that came up over the weekend, Newt Gingrich, this time a tweet from him. You go back a month, and he said that Bob Mueller was superb and an impeccable pick to have as the special counsel. And now he's saying that the Republicans are delusional if they think the special counsel is going to be fair, referencing who he's hiring. What do we make of all of this right now?
Well, there's a lot of reflexive partisanship and sort of knee-jerk, what are you wearing, a red jersey or are you wearing a blue jersey? But what we have seen over the last week, Dana, is that Mueller, former FBI director, well-respected law enforcement guy, has been bringing on real pros, some of the best people who are good at investigating financial crimes, which I know is scaring people close to Trump. These are people who went after the guys who were behind Enron. They went after Volkswagen for their diesel emissions problems. And so some people who are close to Trump are seeing the kinds of criminal prosecutors that Mueller is bringing on, and they're getting very nervous that this is going to end up becoming a financial crimes case where perhaps they start turning over a lot of rocks in the president's financial dealings, and they end up coming up with some stuff that wasn't really related to the original Russia investigation, but that could be legally problematic. That's the concern that a lot of people close to Trump have based on looking at just the real professionals and the talented lawyers who are coming onto Mueller's team.
Yeah, special investigator on one thing does not mean it will only be one thing that is investigated. James Hohmann, thank you so much.